Hey, this is Anthony, and welcome back to Last Month in Security. I've got my usual cohorts here. Halcyon's Chief Security and Trust Officer, Ben Carr. Ben,
Hey,
how
Anthony.
you doing?
Yeah, good. Doing
Good to
really
see
well.
you.
Glad to be here.
Been a road warrior for a while?
A little bit, traveling quite a bit. Yeah,
All right.
next couple of weeks. So.
Well, thanks for coming in for the show.
Happy to do it.
Of course, Halcyon's CMO, Ryan Golden. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Glad we're back in person doing this here.
Hey, in studio.
Yeah.
And we have a special guest today, Chaunda Dallas.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, Chaunda, welcome. Hey, tell us a little bit about your background, because it's interesting. We met in Vegas at BlackCat.
Yes.
At one of the Halcyon parties. And we quickly got into talking about healthcare cybersecurity, and I thought your story was really interesting, how you arrived on the security side coming from healthcare. But give us a little bit.
Yeah. So being in healthcare, I've been in nursing for 20 plus years. I don't really want to date myself, but working in emergency medicine, night shift, a lot of grunt work. What I had realized, and just kind of getting closer and closer to COVID, patient care was just getting kind of, it was a lot. So a lot of my colleagues, they decided they wanted to step out of it. They were seeing that IT was still going to, be something where still lucrative and be able to still be in the fight as far as within healthcare. So a lot of them went into nursing informatics or healthcare informatics. And that wasn't really my cup of tea. And then I met someone that we were talking about health information exchange, because besides working in the emergency room, I also did outpatient surgical center. So when we were doing outpatient surgeries with our interventional radiologists, we had to, between the dialysis centers and the nephrologist's office, we had to get all of this information. So it was really big. We were working on HIEs, the Health Information Exchange, and making sure that those exchanges were being sent over, secure. And a lot of times it's like, hey, I can just give you the information over the phone. No, you can't. and other people in the office is like, yeah, just give it to me and I'll write it down. No, we can't do it that way. So just kind of seeing those different things, and it just kind of interests me more. So then I decided, okay, I just want to do something different. And I always say I made a full left turn and went to school and decided to get my master's in information technology and cybersecurity. And then I specialize, of course, in health technology, because that's my wheelhouse. So even starting that program, it was kind of crazy, because I'm like, Python, what are you guys even talking about? It was so confusing. And
it was all net new for you.
Yeah, it was
right?
brand new. And then on top of that, decided to ask around and say, hey, what's the best system computer I should get? And someone said, oh yeah, just get a Mac. So I go in, hey, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this with a Mac. And my professors are like, yeah, so we don't use Macs. And so now I'm into a brand new field, don't know what I'm doing, and I have a computer that I just paid an exuberant amount of money for, but now I have to figure it all out. But it was really interesting, and I learned a lot. And I always get the question, hey, nursing to cybersecurity, and one thing I was just saying earlier, to me it's the same. I mean, you're running, you're taking care of patients like crazy, you're trying to triage, you're trying to make sure everyone's taken care of. Me going into cybersecurity, yeah, I'm throwing myself back into the fire, but it's the same thing.
And now you're in the PhD program.
Yeah.
So you're actually taking for careers a traditional route, but for cybersecurity, a very non-traditional route.
Very non-traditional, and that's what I'm definitely finding out. So it just seemed as though that I just had to keep proving myself that, hey, I can do this. Hey, I can be, in this space. And then when I was at Hacker Summer Camp last year, ran into a professor at Capital Technology, and we just started talking. And when I brought up healthcare, he was like, wait, we have this amazing PhD healthcare cybersecurity that you need to be in. And I said, well,
The program can't be that old.
No, it's not. No.
Yeah.
So, I looked into it, applied for it, and next you know, they're like, hey, yeah, we definitely want you in there. And initially, I wanted to go for offensive. They had an offensive engineering program, which I did get into that one, but they kind of talked me out of it. They're like, well, are you sure you want to do it? Look at your background. But my main thing was I wanted to be able to go to a hospital or go to a healthcare industry and let them know, okay, let me break into this system, let me hack into the system so I can show you these vulnerabilities. And one thing that I remember listening to a show that you guys had, and you mentioned legacy systems. I mean,
it's super easy, super hard to hack into a hospital system, right? They're using the newest technology, the best staff, the most resources. It's just healthcare's locked down, right?
not even close. Not even close. Because they're like, hey, let's get the newest thing. Let's get the newest thing. I was even there at Piedmont when they decided to implement Epic. And I picked up on Epic, and one thing I was telling Anthony, our doctors are like, I don't have time for that. Doesn't matter. Guess what? This is happening.
That's a new
Epic
reality.
is here. Uh-huh. We have to learn this. And I said, it's just going to help you. No, I don't have time. So I ended up being an Epic super user to train all my doctors because no one wanted to deal with them and, rant and raving. No, nobody has time in ER, but it is what it is. We have to do it. But, we upgrade these things, and what do we do with this legacy equipment? We throw it over here. But then when you have overflow, the hospitals, we're on a diversion because we can't accept anybody. So we're running out of equipment. Think about COVID. I mean, vents, even before COVID hit, we were having problems with vents. So what were you doing? You're pulling these old vents, or you're pulling this old equipment out, and no one's updating anything. Hey, we need to use it.
Yeah, that's actually, I heard somebody else saying from the healthcare side that when they have an incident in a hospital and they can't use electronic systems anymore and they have to fall back to paper.
Here we go.
There's a lot of people that actually don't know how to do that in paper anymore, right? Maintain that. And then how do you take that data and then put it back into the electronic system when it comes back online?
Firsthand, let me tell you, been there, done that. And the first time it happened, 3 o'clock in the morning, we were already on diversion. And everything shut down, and everyone completely freaked out because we were like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And now, mind you, it's night shift. So no one's up. We're going to have to start making calls and waking people up. But doesn't matter. You can call them. They're going to get there. They're going to try to figure out, hey, how to help you. But we're here. We have patients. We have patients in the waiting room. We have patients that are getting ready to go to the OR. We have patients in radiology. I mean, what are we doing? So in that situation, we have a downtime system or downtime policy, procedure, booklet, drawer to go to, and guess what? That information hadn't been updated in forever.
Oh, yeah. So having a plan and executing on a plan.
It's two different
things.
Because
it's kind of crazy to think about, even that from a healthcare perspective. There's certainly a lot of technology that's involved in healthcare now. But at the core, right, it's a very personal, physical-driven practice.
Correct.
But without technology, we have forgotten how to do that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then we went from nursing and doctors going from the handwritten and the handheld charts. And then, it was oh, God, we got to learn this new system. But now we have this new system, and now we got to go back to the old system. We don't know what to do. So you guys had mentioned before there was a patient family member that stopped them from getting the wrong medication. So that's a big thing, is verifying and re-verifying and verifying again. Even if that patient can't speak for themselves, now you have to verify with the family member that, hey, they do have these allergies, or hey, they do take these medications.
Systems are down that you've come
Correct. And so that's
on.
another thing. So now what are you doing? You're taking that person's last name, and maybe you use the last 4 of their socials or maybe you use their birth date, but sometimes you can't do that because you got somebody else in the same area that might have the same birth date.
Yeah.
So now you're labeling this blood. So now instead of you putting it in the tube system to ship it down, no, you're running down to the lab, and now the lab is doing the old school
You're figuring out
way.
this.
Right.
Yeah.
So everything.
And you're figuring out these contingencies in
Right.
real time as
In
you're
real
doing
time.
it when you're supposed to be taking care of patients. Right?
Exactly.
You're a very interesting entry into cybersecurity, but I think it's actually super valid. And I think more folks who have deep domain expertise in their field should consider that kind of a transition, because
agree 100%.
Just think of it from a data flow perspective.
Right.
We have no idea that specific workflow, data flow between patient care, doctors, ambulance services. That's a lot of tribal knowledge in there, years of expertise in that we can talk about cybersecurity and ransomware, and maybe we can get a little bit into the actual flow of data through healthcare systems, but it's incredibly complex. And to your point, you might have systems that get connected back to a network after 10 years of not being connected to a network. In very, very few instances do you have other industries that operate on that kind of thing. So I think it's a really cool entry point. And again, people who are deeply specialized in industries that are critical would love to say, hey, go back to school, get some certifications, go into cybersecurity. We need your kind of expertise to help protect these networks. So cool stuff.
Right. Yeah. I told her last night at dinner she's going to be a unicorn when she gets her PhD.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, and that ding 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 earlier, by the way, was you got the daily double. So congratulations.
Nice.
Speaking of some healthcare stuff, so this one just kind of popped up before the show. We decided to just talk a little bit about this. Microsoft just issued a warning of ransomware attacks against U.S. healthcare. Inc. ransomware, which is one of the bigger groups right now, if you are tracking along with our ransomware malicious quadrant that we put out every quartile, they've been in the report for quite some time now. It was a lot of information, not very well organized, in the couple of articles that we looked at. Apparently, the source for all this information was Microsoft's Twitter feed, right?
Yeah, it looks like a kind of a series of posts on whatever you want to call that platform that kind of went over Vanilla Tempest and sort of the associations with other groups and other methods that have been around for a while. And obviously this is pretty brand new information, and there's that fog of war capability the fog of war that results from that of stuff's probably going to change in the next 48, 72 hours. I know that they didn't necessarily name victims, but you'd have to imagine that for Microsoft to go out and talk about a new group that is specifically targeting healthcare, they're going to have data, and it's going to be, we don't know, but it sounds like it's probably several victims and several organizations.
And this also kind of points out how confusing it is when we talk about, when you're talking about Lockbit
Who's what,
ransomware.
Right.
Okay, there's the Lockbit ransomware platform, right, which includes the Lockbit ransomware payload.
Right.
But then when we say, Lockbit attacked MGM, but it wasn't Lockbit, it was Scattered Spider, who's an affiliate who uses Lockbit. And then there's also evidence that they've used some other RAS platforms in some attacks as well. So in this particular instance, we have an affiliate attacker called Vanilla Tempest.
Well, Microsoft's calling Vanilla Tempest, I believe, right? I think that's their naming convention.
Yeah.
That's their naming convention. They're leveraging a JavaScript piece of malware called GootLoader that's been around for quite some time to drop the Inc. ransomware. GootLoader is spread through SEO poisoning, basically water and hole attacks, fake URLs, something highly searchable that people are going to click on and get an infection. The articles that we were looking at said Vanilla Tempest is associated with Vice Society, which is a threat actor we were tracking in the malicious quartile for some time early on, and they've been fairly inactive. They've dropped off.
Well, inactive versus not,
or
just not being named
or
are totally different, right?
Yeah, or
we
are
know.
they active under a different name?
Exactly.
Who knows,
We know that
right?
these attackers use multiple different names. The industry even names them in different ways somehow.
Yeah,
So
I think a lot of
lineage
people
is
who aren't
difficult.
in the industry think it's like this well-defined box, right? You stack these boxes, and that's Vanilla Tempest, and that's this group, and that's this group, and it doesn't really work like that,
Yeah,
right?
it's not clean.
It's a very amorphous kind of economy
There's not
that
a lot of-
people move, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of differentiating between the name of the payload, the name of the group, the name of the affiliate, and what's cleared there. And obviously these guys have also mentioned in the article, we've seen Vanilla Tempest associated with BlackCat, Quantum Locker, Zeppelin, and Rhysida payloads previously. So yeah, it can be a little confusing out there if you're an organization trying to make some decisions on how best to defend or what you're supposed to do with this alert. As you
Right,
said,
but then
there's
someone like myself coming from healthcare and being in healthcare, and I might not have that. I might know of a few names because of what's going on out there, but to us, just like you said, okay, here's the box. All right, here's a list of people that are going after healthcare industries. So, what are we doing? How can we? Why can't we use that list and start seeing what's going on?
Well,
You know what I mean? So
I-
it's
I-
kinda
How
hard.
do you get actionable info from it?
Yeah, like
Right.
so there's that two pieces of the names and the groups and who it is. Like that's interesting to people who are down deep in the threat actor infrastructure, trying to figure out, do the research on it. But to the people on the front lines that are actually trying to defend, it's like, okay, how do I take concrete action to mitigate the threat here, right? What do I do? I don't really care whether it's one group or another group.
Right.
You just care
Right.
about mitigation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, probably the most actionable thing in that article was, once again, as you pointed out, Ryan, it was RDP that was getting leveraged for the
Yeah, and well, one of the other interesting things that I saw was heavy use of mega tools, right, to offload data, which obviously is something that we've been developing some countermeasures for here at Halcyon as well. So data exfiltration first type of ransomware groups continue to be pretty overly represented, I think. There's a couple stats floating around of 80% of these groups start with data exfil before they go into the actual payload detonation and encryption of data. I wouldn't be surprised if it was higher than that, but sort of just continuing that these groups focus their efforts there on getting data out first before they go and
data
encrypt.
exfiltration with some ransomware thrown in.
Yeah, it's interesting the past couple of years how it's just flipped in order, right? But continued validation that this is a huge.
Well, again, I think
component.
that goes back to we talk a lot about the economy of it, right? And you track back to the monetary goals and what they're trying to do. Look at what the threat actor motivation is. Yeah, if you can double, triple, quadruple extort off the data
in a heavily regulated industry like
Heavily
healthcare,
regulated,
Right, because you can take that information, and we're going back to the Lehigh. You can take that information, you can extort the organization. Now, guess what? You have these pictures, and so now let's maybe go after these patients. Or one thing that I think about also, and it hasn't really been out there, is think about sports. Think about athletes. So going into that infrastructure, maybe a ransomware attack on that. So now instead of just healthcare, you're double dipping because now you can get this organizations. Then, hey, guess what? We're going to go after the athletes because now we have your information.
Yeah.
Oh man, my fantasy football team would super benefit. I can
Actually, exactly. So you got to think about it that way. So and that's that double, triple dipping, and hey, one RAS group might take it and say, hey, let me go ahead and go after them. And then another group picks it up and says, okay, let me try to get something out of it as well.
Yeah, and then they just targeting industries that are going to have penalties and fines for leaking, PHI, right?
Right.
Well, I think that's been part of the recent activity, right? Is I think there's been this pivot to we see we are working with industries where they have to pay, right? And so as a result, we're going to focus even more on that. Where you see kind of an avoidance, right? It was like, all right, hospitals are kind of off the table. We're not going to do that. It's certainly pivoting towards where, okay, let's look for things where we can force that monetization in an easier fashion.
Yeah, there was a time where we saw certain groups stay away from certain segments for probably just to lower the heat on them to some degree. But it seems like that's kind of gone out the
They used to
window.
say they wouldn't attack hospitals. So interesting.
Right. But because healthcare industries, it's a given.
Can we talk to well-funded, best infrastructure out there, many resources, right?
They are so reactive. Like, come on, like, can you get into the proactive state? Let's go ahead and put these measures in place so we can try to mitigate these risks, or we can try to offset these ransomware attacks. But no, just like you said, hey, they have the money. We're going to go ahead and put all these monitors on lock, and we know where the backup generator is going to kick in. And eventually that backup generator is going to go out. So we need to release these funds so we can have access to our system. Because people don't even think about that as well. Because when this thing happens, we have babies in, incubators, and you have critical care patients in ICU on vents. So when your system is down, it's like, okay, what's going on? Why is our system down?
Yeah, it's kind of like
such a perfect target.
it's the worst of all storms, right? You
it
actually
is.
have people that could die or be impacted by it. You have huge regulatory environment for data leaking.
Right.
You have one of the most complex environments, that you'd have to administer. So it's kind of the perfect storm, really, for these groups to target and continue to target.
To truly pack up one patient from ICU, to try to get them in an ambulance and get them to another facility that can take care of them while we're going through this. So now you're talking about resources. Now you're talking about personnel. You're even talking about possibly sending a doctor, depending on what's going on with that patient. So it just, it's...
In my
ripple.
research,
It
I've
is. It's awful.
read a lot about that hospital that you're going to send that patient to isn't ready for that
Right.
influx.
That's
either.
it. Because now, okay, everybody's already on diversion. And, when you talk about being on diversion, who besides the hospitals that are influx with the amount of patients, so now you have the ambulance. So now you have the paramedics that are out there, and they're circling all these different hospitals trying to see, okay, well, I understand you're on diversion. We have a critical patient. We have a patient that we're coding. It doesn't matter if you're on diversion, we're coming. And we're like, and a lot of times we won't even get that call because we're telling them we're on diversion. So they decide they're not going to call us. They're just going to come to the door. They're doing chest compressions. They're rolling in. And we're like, oh, my God. And, we have to stop. Not everybody, but you still have to stop what you're doing and keep moving.
Yeah.
And you got to take care of these patients. So, I mean, it's scary. It's scary to be
Yeah,
in there.
it's interesting in the fact that you can kind of have the same outcome from essentially a cyber attack like ransomware. It doesn't even have to impact every device, just
Right.
enough core devices to make it, medical records inaccessible or delayed or corrupted or deleted. Can have the same knock-on effect as like a mass casualty event or an enormous national disaster in the region. And this is simply something that somebody bought access to for a couple pennies and targeted it.
Katrina.
Yeah.
Where we were located, the hospital, the facility I was at Piedmont, but I was at their East Side location, which is, let's say, 40 minutes out of the downtown Atlanta. But Katrina patients, at our hospital, we were getting them. They were all coming in. And that's another thing as far as, health information exchange. Because of what happened in Katrina, and they're trying to get these patients, and they're trying to ship them everywhere, we ended up with about 15 to 16 patients. And they came in with maybe a color tag on their leg, and this is what area they fell under, and this is what they could grab off of. I mean, so they came in, and we're like, we need more information. Guess what? You're not getting
barely even
anything. You're not
triaged it.
getting anything from, what's going on in New Orleans. I can't pick up the phone and call anybody because of what's happening there.
Yeah.
So now we're starting from scratch. So now you have that, plus, okay, now your systems are down. So now everybody's writing with a piece of paper. Everybody's trying to figure everything out. So it even goes back to how the healthcare, as far as playbooks, you got to have your playbooks. It's the same thing with this downtime system. You got to have the system together. You got to have this update. Somebody's got to update this because anything could happen. Yeah.
Now, running those playbooks, as far as practicing,
Right.
What can you tell us about that? I mean, are these playbooks are there? You said, but a lot of times you go there and they're out of date.
They're out of date.
So
They're not
obviously they
updated
haven't
because
run a
everyone's
tabletop
so.
exercise or
Yeah.
Just
Are
like
they
I heard
running
you mention.
tabletops for these types of
Nope.
events? Yeah.
No, not at all.
so it's just having that playbook in a drawer.
Drawer.
Checks a box
Checks a box.
for compliance. Right?
And I was the type of person that I'm going to learn this information and I'm going to know it because I want to know it for me. And I don't want to have to keep going back and asking, hey, do you know where this is? So I go out there and I get the information. So I ended up being just the resource person of the ER, and everybody was like, hey, just ask Chaunda. So it happens 3 o'clock in the morning. One of my doctors called me. I'm at home. I'm asleep. Hey, I hate to bother you, but can you tell me where this is? Now, you have an entire ER full of people, but you called me, and in my sleep, I said, yeah. And I told him exactly where it was, and he went right to it. He said, I shouldn't have to call you at 3 a.m. I said, no, you shouldn't.
And then if you leave, they've lost that institutional knowledge and stuff too.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not documented.
Yeah.
Have you found there's been any kind of a culture shift since ransomware operators have really taken to targeting healthcare providers as I don't want to call out you or you to call out your organization, obviously, but in general.
Be specific. Exactly who?
But in general, do you feel that the awareness is being raised?
It really, no, I don't. I mean, it should be. It has to be. That conversation has to happen. A lot of the C-suites in medicine, chief nursing, all of those guys they're clinical, but you still have to have that CISO or that CIO. You have to have that person in that room to explain to them why. Just like building software, you have to start with, you got to have security from the beginning. Don't try to add it at the end. But, and that's what healthcare is. They're continuing trying to add it at the end.
You would think with the prevalence of just the last year
Right.
alone, right, there'd be a
Change.
big shift.
Right.
Why,
But no.
why not?
Perfect example. I'm originally from Milwaukee, and I just so happened to be visiting family in Milwaukee when the big, earlier this year, I want to say it was March, Aurora Healthcare ransomware attack happened there. And it was the same thing because I knew a lot of people that worked there, and just, me calling, hey, what's going on? Chaunda, we can't even find downtown. No one knows where these forms. I said, are you guys, and I've never worked for them, but to hear that, and they were even saying that on the news, like no one knew where the forms were.
The news
no
coverage
one knew.
described it as absolute
And
chaos.
I sat there and I'm like, you got to be kidding, because I was talking about this 15 years ago. And now in 2024, and the first thing, someone in news says, or a patient would call and say, hey, I had this test done, and, it was an important test, and I really want to get the results. They don't know how to, they can't do that.
Right.
And, one thing that we did, we outsourced at one point in time, our radiologists got tired of coming in and reading tests, or they didn't want to get woken up in the middle of the night to read x-rays or CTs. So they outsourced it, and we outsourced it to Australia.
It's a time zone difference.
Right, right. Huge. And so it was interesting, we're at 3:00 in the morning, and my doctor wants me to get in contact with the radiologist because they're really not understanding what they said. So now I'm trying to get in contact with them. But that's health. We're talking about health information exchange from, that's
outside the
huge.
country.
So the
Outside the
slightest
country.
like deviation in a system working,
Yes.
the whole thing is
The
kind
whole
of broken.
thing.
Yeah, it's like
Do
a
you,
domino.
just in your opinion, we have seen obviously over the past couple of years some pretty big either healthcare or kind of related healthcare industry or hospitals directly and healthcare networks directly impacted by ransomware. In your opinion, do you think that folks that are in that industry view it as like a computer problem versus
Ding, ding,
I'm
ding.
being actively targeted
No.
by a criminal organization? Gotcha.
I'm-
So it's just
I
my computer
promise
is
you,
down.
No,
Yeah.
we're talking about new clinicians and nurses and doctors that are coming out, or maybe they've been in the industry for maybe 2 to 3 years. You would think, okay, or just with what's going on in the last couple of years, you would think that, hey, we need to make sure I'm not telling you have to teach them Python. But you teach them the security awareness. The cyber hygiene within healthcare has got to be better. And, new doctors or doctors that have been there for a while and clinical staff,
That's an important call out, right? Like the attack we talked about earlier, right? The one that was just announced. It's a watering hole attack, right? And so just the education and awareness of somebody to don't click on a URL where you're not sure where
That's
it is.
all they
right?
know,
That still
honestly.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we were talking about. Every year we have to do the same education. So we do the same boring training videos.
We do the same. Everybody
Right.
does.
But what we were doing, because we were running around the ER, everybody would kind of get together in the middle of the night, and we all have the same thing. Okay, what did you guys get for this? So we can get through it real fast. So we're just passing the answers along, saying, do this, and so now we're done.
And I'm sure the CISO was happy about that.
Hypothetically.
Yeah.
But you're right,
You're
exactly.
hypothetically doing
But
that.
the thing is, what needs to be, besides saying, don't click this, because everybody hears that, oh, yeah, so I'm just not going to click on that. I'm just not, but it's more than just that.
Well, so how do you educate again? Okay, don't click this email, a
Right.
link in an email, right?
Right.
Go type in the URL directly and stuff. Make sure you get on the right. But I think with SEO poisoning, you're talking about a malicious link that's in the search results.
Malicious advertising, malicious fake web pages associated with something. So
Yeah, but
it's very common, but it's interesting. I'd love to be able to dissect and see some of those sites and how they've been targeting organizations. Because for Microsoft to come out and say that, hey, there's a new attacker leveraging this method or known to leverage this method and targeting specifically healthcare, that's a pretty nuanced kind of campaign, and would love to see kind of what they're are they targeting things of like a blog post on how to protect healthcare data and it's actually a watering. I don't know, it's speculation, but it would be interesting to see sort of like where these attackers are focusing their effort, not just from a like TDPs. I guess it would fall under a TDP, but like that's kind of content related. Are they getting smarter in how they're targeting content for these attacks?
Look, I think we've seen it in the phishing side, right? Phishing's certainly gotten smarter, especially with AI, right?
100%.
It's really hard to tell. So I'm a fan of saying that, look, you can make a crafted attack that's going to fool anybody, right? It's just how much effort and time, which I think AI has certainly
except for you.
reduced that.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'm not going to say that. I could be fooled. It'd be hard, but I could be fooled.
Well, see, that's good. So I want to use that to segue here. So let's say, we all know not to click on links in emails, right? Nobody said don't click on links in search results. I don't ever recall seeing that in this training, So, after a security event, we're starting to see a little bit more like take the SolarWinds case that the SEC had brought and that a judge dismissed,
Sure.
I think 95% of, saying they didn't, wasn't really their purview. Security controls, you can't read as the same thing as accounting controls, SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley kind of requirements and stuff. So how much are we going to start seeing, this kind of Monday morning armchair quarterbacking after the fact of, Ben, you made these decisions 6 months ago, and then this event happened, and now I'm looking at this event and the decisions you made with complete clarity and hindsight, and I'm going to try and judge you and your organization and your program, security program, for these decisions that you made, and I'm going to fault you, say, oh, you should have made this decision instead of that one, where that clear choice may not have been there when you were making the decision, right?
Well, very rarely are the choices ever clear, right? They're usually nuanced. And part of that is how are you characterizing the risk and how are you presenting that risk? And I think traditionally we've done a really bad job in the industry. I think part of I'll put the blame on the vendors a little bit, right? As a practice, as an industry, we haven't done a great job, but also the vendors haven't done a great job. We get a lot of statistics and data, but that statistics and data aren't normally translatable readily into a business justification or a risk analysis. And so the number of vulnerabilities you have doesn't necessarily equate to the risk, right? It's a more nuanced conversation for the CISO or the security team to contextualize that and say, based upon these statistics, here's what the risk to the business is. Now, how do we make an intellectual discussion about whether we should accept that risk, whether we should, use insurance to buy down that risk, like how we treat the risk. And so that's kind of the first piece of it, right? I think we are going to be in a world where we're going to see more people that come under the gun, so to speak, and the analysis is made, especially from shareholder lawsuits. I think really that's one area where we're going to start to see this come up is shareholders are going to say, hey, value of my stock went down. Did you make the right decisions? And I think the question for a lot of companies is, did you have a CISO, right? Was he empowered to do the job, right? Do you have the governance structure in place where those decisions that you talked about in the boardroom and at the C-suite, did those get documented so we can understand how the decisions were made? Businesses, in marketing, right? You make a decision where you make an investment or not, right? And then something happens and it either works for the company or it doesn't work for the company. And there's always that Monday morning quarterbacking of like, well, if we had known all this information, we might have made a different decision. But I think as long as you have the information to say, hey, we made the right call at the time, that's usually okay, and people look favorably on it. It's when you don't have that information to go back and nobody can ascertain why the decision was made. That's then where I think people are falling.
Documenting those
Yeah,
decisions.
it's documenting it, right? It's understanding it and having a good process. So a lot of people don't have a process. A lot of people aren't empowering the CISO. I think when people outside of the CISO or the security teams hear the CISO wants a seat at the table, what they hear is, I want more power, right?
Right.
More money. Yeah.
It could be more money. We often
Right.
mean that too. What we really mean is we want to be part of the conversation to properly inform the rest of the decision makers about why we're advocating for a decision, so then we can make the right decision. Because when you're in the seat and you're like, man, this is a really bad decision, it could be it's a really bad decision. It could be you're just not even clued in on what else is going on in the business. And so it's a two-way street. I need the context of the business to understand what to do and how to properly protect it. And the rest of the business needs to be properly informed about the risk so they can weigh in on that decision. So it's that partnership that's really hard.
Wrong, Ben, you're going to jail.
Well, it could be.
So let's look at a
And
couple.
the statistics that
Man,
you're
you could have
getting.
just said I'm headed to jail. We didn't have to go through all that.
Here's a couple of recent examples, and there's lots of nuance in
Yeah.
here, right? So we had
Hit me.
Enzo Biochem, biotech company, got ordered to pay $4.5 million to the attorneys general of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut following the 2023 ransomware attack, compromised 2.4 million people's data.
Sure.
So they had no lack of multi-factor authentication. They had poor security. So this is a pretty clear.
So I know none of the specific details, right? Like when you read something in a news article, you get a top level, right? Like we all have our opinions of these things as we see them, but we don't know the details. But let's just speak in the generalities of what we know. Lack of multi-factor authentication. In today's world, that's pretty much a no-brainer that somebody had something wrong that they should have done that.
Yeah,
So
and
that's-
generally says it poor password management. So that could be default passwords. That could be lack
shared
of changing,
credentials,
shared
right?
credentials,
Which
lack
hadn't
of
been updated in a
changing,
decade. If
stuff
you
like
haven't
that.
updated your credentials in a decade, I don't know. We were talking earlier. I've had a couple data breach notifications. It's probably common knowledge that passwords are out there, right?
Yeah.
So, if you haven't updated them in a decade, probably again, you're some fault
take
there.
it from the hindsight. This is we could probably safely say not necessarily a best effort there in the program, and so maybe a fine is something that's
Appropriate.
that's warranted there.
Yeah.
Now you look at Lehigh Valley Healthcare Network. They've been in the news quite a bit because these attackers not only dropped a ransomware payload on them and exfiltrated sensitive data, they actually released sensitive patient data, including images of breast cancer patients.
Yeah.
So very compromising, right? But there was not necessarily those indicators of a poor security program, right? They seem to be doing what we would say would be, due diligence, best effort, or standard of due care that they were maintaining. But they're getting hit with a fine too, right?
Yeah. So
if you're an organization that just by your very nature that you're handling regulated data, and we know that a determined attacker with enough time and resources is going to be able to penetrate pretty much any target, then are you just
Well, what is the alternative, right? Like if you have a well-documented security program, you've had a number of controls. Yes, absolutely. Attackers that are determined are going to spend resources, time, money, maybe burning tools that haven't been seen before as well on a high enough value target. But ultimately, that's kind of what that regulatory function is meant to do, right? Enforce that
But
and
could they
say
have
what can be
done
done better.
Better, right? Let's just assume that they were doing everything.
It's always
they
easy to
could
speculate.
that's in a way the difficult part and the good part about the legal system, right? Is like, look, if you're a breast cancer patient and images get leaked, right? That's the definition of insult to injury, right? And so I can certainly see in that case, like somebody filing a lawsuit against you, right? Now, if they've done everything, if they've got the documentation, the governance, if they've got the right stuff in place, there's going to be something that they could have done better. But the question is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, was the right business decision made? And if that comes out, hopefully, again, that lawsuit will then come out for them.
But then again, that's what the benefit of hindsight, right?
Right, but what I'm saying is but again, there are standards and there are if they come out that they did all the right things, then my hope would be that they would win the lawsuit, right? The challenge with the legal system is anybody can file a lawsuit for anything. You could be perfect and you could still end up with a lawsuit.
And juries aren't necessarily rational.
That's true.
Okay. So third one,
which is again, I think just an enhancement of like why you need to protect yourself. Right, like why you need to be doing all the right things, why you need to make the investment, why you need to have a CISO, why he needs to have a seat at the table so he understands the business, you understand the risk. Like if you're not doing all those things, you're going into the lawsuit like with the cards already stacked against you. So, even on the board level, like the board should have somebody on the board that actually understands
those risks.
Or has experience with cyber, right?
Risk management.
Like there are very few boards, even in the Fortune 500. Latest stats I've seen said that there's one, General Motors, that actually has a decent, like I think 2 or 3 people on the board that actually have cyber experience, right?
Okay.
Not just that, hey, I went to an hour class on cyber, right? That isn't experience. So out of the Fortune 500, with only one board that actually has that, I'm assuming there will be more in light of all these things. That speaks volumes, right? Like. Get somebody on your board who actually has experience and understand. I mean, that's one thing you could start to do. And I think if you're doing a little more than the regulatory guidelines say, you're probably going to come out in at least in a decent position to start with, right? But don't let the cards get stacked against you.
Okay, that's the lawsuits, but the regulators coming after you. The regulators coming after you, right? So.
Yeah, but then you're either going to meet the regulation or you're not, right? Like the bad thing about a lawsuit is if you're going to get sued, it's kind of, you don't know how it's going to come out, right? There's the law, but the law is always at the will, the attorneys and what gets negotiated and the feelings of the jury, right, as you put it. With a regulatory environment,
it's fairly cut.
It's clearly written down.
Yeah.
Like if you didn't do the regulatory things that you needed to do, well, then I would expect you to be, found guilty by the regulators, right? If you're doing everything, then
and
likely you'll come out okay.
Documentation.
Right?
That documentation.
And a lot of times, like when you go under audit or regulatory guidelines, they don't want to see that they do want to see that you're doing everything, but they're not necessarily looking for perfect. What they're looking for is you have documented process and you are adhering to the process.
Okay. And
If you're saying you're scanning on a weekly basis and you're only scanning monthly, that's a problem, right? If you say I have an EDR and I've got it deployed to all my machines and you don't have it deployed to half your environment, that's a problem, right? So again, there's nuance in this, but a lot of times it's, are you adhering to what you say you're doing and do you have documentation to prove it?
All right, here's kind of a weirder one.
Anthony with the weird.
Yeah, a company called National Public Data.
Okay.
Got popped 2.7 billion records.
It's a lot.
It's like, well, first of all, I got to ask, has any of our...
Half of those records were already exposed before.
Right, every report.
Maybe all of them.
Are we all safe now because of all of our stuff has been exposed? And...
What do you think, Chaunda?
Well, kind of what Anthony said earlier. I mean, our information is out there. So, okay, so what are we going to do now? Like, what's next? What do we...
You can't put the genie back in the
no,
bottle.
No, you can't put it... Or, different actors, bad actors are passing it around.
But I haven't even got to the weird part yet.
Get to the weird part.
Okay, where's the weird?
So 2.7 billion records, right? They're now the subject of a class action lawsuit.
Oh, okay.
They had scraped all this data from publicly available sources and aggregated it. So they basically did the work for the attacker, right? Who wanted to leverage this, for identity theft or whatever else. They pulled this data together from all these sources, and then of course they're aggregating it and selling it to organizations who want to give you better commercials on your Facebook feed.
Okay, so where I was going to go, this feeds into it a little bit is, look, so I got notification. I got like 2 notifications from a financial institution saying, hey, my data's been leaked. And my instant instantaneous response is, so what? Like, it's already out there. It's been leaked a bunch of times. Mm-hmm. Like, what does it matter to me? I can get credit monitoring, and that only helps so much. But like, there's no real impact to these companies when they keep having these things, right? They pay a small fine, relatively, right, and they go on. We haven't seen some real teeth get into this. But the question becomes like, I think the industry is actually worse because we've had so many breaches that as a general consumer, they just throw those notices out. They don't care.
No,
if consumers cared when AT&T or T-Mobile or Verizon, I'll just say all 3 of them there, right? When any one of them had a breach, they would lose half of their consumer base, and it would matter to them.
Did they even understand the notice in the first place?
Right? Yeah, a lot of people don't understand it. Most people, I think, they're numb.
Yeah,
right? We use the analogy of like if you get hit in the arm enough times, you get a callus built up.
Well,
right?
it's alert fatigue, right?
Yeah.
Just the same way as you're working in the SOC, and you have 99%, just false alerts based on some misconfiguration or something.
99 problems in the ransomware one.
It's So alert fatigue very common in this industry especially for like endpoint agents. It's the same thing with consumers, right? To your point, how many breach notifications are you going to receive in your lifetime?
Right.
It's
It's like an email campaign.
Is the differentiator?
It's like, okay, my God, here we go.
It's another junk mail of
Let me unsubscribe, and then guess what? I'm going to get another email.
And you get
exactly.
The remediation or the compensation is 2 years of credit monitoring. That's pretty standard, right?
I've got a lifetime of credit monitoring.
Well, but even that, how much would that help you, right? Like it's almost like I'd rather see regulatory or legislative action that said, if there's a breach of your data, right, and let's have a reset. We'll just have a reset. We'll give everybody, the perfect world. Everybody gets new data, right? Okay, so my data has been compromised. If you breach my data, I get half of my lifetime revenue to you back. So if I've been a customer for 10 years, you get 5. Like, let's put actual teeth into something, right? Let's make it painful.
I like that.
Because the CISO of that company needs help when he's in the boardroom. Like, how much are we going to spend on this? We're going to spend half of 1%, right, to protect our customers' data, which is what our whole business model comes.
We've already acknowledged, though, assumed breach, right? We've already acknowledged a determined attacker can. So
yeah, but what is a determined attacker is a nation state, right? I don't know that a nation state really wants to go after the
they
big
don't have to be a nation state.
No, but
we've seen plenty of
determined attacker. Like that. That's the whenever we talk about this, we're talking about the top tier,
True
right?
traditional APT.
Yeah.
No.
Like you can
I think-
defend against something at a lower level generally.
Well, yeah. For a
Not
while.
your mom and pop. The,
Sure.
the local
But
donut
it's
shop.
more, it's
can.
more of the protection on the steering wheel from getting your car stolen. They'll just go to another car.
Yeah.
But maybe they'll come back to yours, and maybe you weren't using it at that time, right? I think the interesting thing that you bring up, Ben, about adding teeth into the regulation is, I think, and this is my opinion, in part of it, you'd have to go so deep into some other things like social security numbers, sort of just the nature of how insecure all of our identities are from birth, right? To actually be able to enact some controls.
Yeah, I mean, Social Security number is a good example of data. Like, does it really matter anymore? That's pretty easy to figure out anybody's Social Security number, right? So I don't. Why do we even ask for that? Like, as identifying information?
It's still
Right?
used.
Hey, let me have
It's
your
still
last
used
four.
by every
You already have
service
it.
provider,
It is,
and
but it's silly, right? Like it wasn't.
Yeah.
That actually wasn't. I mean, if you go back and look, it wasn't the intended purpose, and it was supposed to be specifically prohibited from being used from anything else other than
Other
the
than Social
governmental
Security.
identifier, right, for Social
Correct.
Security.
Sure.
However, everybody just used it because it was a convenient. Like it was the primary key for everyone.
Right.
Keep in mind that they only show the last four of your social, which are the most important four.
Digits,
because-
yeah. 'cause
Yes.
Because the other ones
Yes.
are just what city you were born
That's
in,
it.
what year it was.
That's
you
it.
know.
That's it, and you have it.
Yeah.
So I think obviously there's much more implications of trying to stop data from being leaked, and yeah, at this point everyone is just so just overwhelmed with getting breach notifications.
Like,
that
we aren't talking about the real
lock your
problems,
credit.
right? Like to your point, why don't we have a better identifier? If we're going to say that you need it, why don't we? We certainly have come a lot further than the digits of the Social Security number.
Correct.
We could come up with a more complex thing, right? That's more secure. That's we actually invest in and maintain.
But we were
as-
just talking about this before the show, right? Identity, passwords. I think we were talking about
We were talking- yeah,
password
passwords, yeah.
managers and whatnot. And it's like there hasn't been a good solution to identity.
No, because the password managers are
No, look,
being
if you-
Instagram
accessed.
now, I
They're
think
still
just
obtuse for people to,
Yeah.
I can't get my parents to use password manager,
Oh my
right?
goodness!
It's-
Don't even try.
I think just yesterday or the day before,
We just add an extra one or
Instagram
two after
now
the
has
password.
secure accounts for teenagers, right? So
Oh,
that,
yes.
that parents can monitor and stuff like that. But of course,
right.
it's when you log on and it says create account, and it says are you under 18, right? That's
right.
because they can't determine whether you're over or under 18.
yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm working with so I do some stuff with a nonprofit that we started, and we're doing some stuff with a bank. And the bank we were looking at to turn on multi-factor authentication with the online account, and it's only we'll send a notification to your email. That's it. Like there's no other type of MFA with them. Like how is this possible in today's world, right? For any
Right.
type of financial institution, and so it just. If you go to any conference, and talked, I was just at the Salesforce Dreamforce conference. It's going on this week. I was there earlier in the week to do some stuff for us, and was a big topic. It was identity, right? And identity is the thing that we're all still trying to solve for, and it seems frustrating that we're this far along and we haven't.
Right, but then it goes right back to what you said. If you get this notification from this bank to say your identity is out there, so now what? I mean,
Then what do you do about it? What's the actionable information,
what do you-
right?
Okay,
Thanks. Another
thanks for letting me
horrible
know.
thing
But what am I
on
gonna
my
do?
week of horrible things that go into my brain.
How do I change it?
And they
I-
sent
I-
that
I- I
information
can't.
to me in an
Yeah,
ego
you
that
can't.
they asked me to click on the link to get more information, which was awesome.
There you
We're
go,
all
clicking
concerned
stuff.
about the
It was a
environment, but we
bit.ly
sure do
link.
cut down a heck of a lot of trees to
Right.
print out breach notifications.
Or even not even that. So, hey, you were a part of this T-Mobile, and there's a possibility where you could be a part of a settlement. Go ahead and you could get anywhere between $5 to $10,000.
Right.
Go ahead and get this information out. Okay, so
So what you're saying is we're now going to start seeing
Fill out this
breach
form with your
notifications as
personal
being
information.
threat actors' new way to get
Let me tell
information
you.
and compromise
let
you.
me tell you.
Yeah. Fill out this
Fill
form.
out this form. You might get a compensation.
Scan this QR code.
There it is.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Oh, I love that. All right. Also in the news in this last couple of weeks, this is from The Record, Chainalysis again. I love the work that they do tracking blockchain transactions so we can get an idea where some of this ransom payments are going and stuff. First half of 2024, over 459 million that they've tracked in extortion payments ransom payments. So last year, if you recall, we've talked about this in the show that we crossed the $1 billion
So you got
mark.
1 billion.
$1 billion.
There you go.
We're past that halfway mark, so we're going to exceed that. It looks like in 2024. Where are we on this ransomware life cycle? Are we still? Is this still just an emerging industry? Are we?
I think it's fairly well established. I don't think it's emerging at this point, right?
It's here.
Yeah, it's been here for a while, and again, to echo what you said, we love the work that Chain Analysis does on tracking these wallets, and that's just the trackable stuff, right? That's
it's not Monero, so
exactly, and there's wallets that are probably a bit more obfuscated as well, collecting payments as well. So it's more of the same, right? We continue to add in additional controls, continue to talk about educating users, continue to make products around cyber threats, and the attackers are generating just as much.
Okay, so we've got maturity. You're saying we've got maturity in this ransomware economy and industry, right?
Yeah, I think you have pockets of vacuums that form if groups get disrupted, but ultimately I think the business model has proven itself to be successable is repeatable.
Are we looking at growth, though? Continued growth? Are we going to be sitting here next year or 2 years from now and go, another Chain Analysis report, awesome work. We've just seen ransomware payments exceed $10 billion.
You want a CAGR number is what you want?
I'm just trying to,
He's looking for the whole business case.
Right.
Here,
we don't know.
Obviously, the more successful these current ransomware groups are, the more incentive there is for others to join in. Ransomware as a service obviously makes it easier for somebody with, less technical skills to stand up an attack campaign. It's kind of been democratized, right? I mean, where are we? I'm trying to put a finger on, how is this problem going to get even bigger and more?
So I think yes, but it raises a question, right? We've talked before about what do you do to get in the way of ransomware? How do you do it, right? And we've talked about regulatory issues and the problem with that if you issue regulations or restrictions. But what about crypto itself, right? There has been talk about in the past about coming up with a U.S. crypto standard and making other types of crypto illegal,
de-anonymizing.
That would, theoretically, getting rid of crypto would take a lot of the win from the sales, right? Not to say they wouldn't find something else, but is that a way we get in front of this?
Well, let's say we did and say, I knew it was going to all those Russians who will never be extradited over here to face charges.
I mean, a $1 billion market versus whatever crypto generates. It seems like 24 hours of crypto exchange is probably more than that, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think it would ever be the driving force behind that.
You don't think it would You don't think it would actually
ransomware payments driving any kind of crypto regulation? I would be surprised personally.
No, but there's a lot more than crypto, right? Crypto's used for a lot more illegal activity than just ransomware.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
But I mean, that's again having some conversations this past week around this in other environments. That was part of the discussion. Is that the enablement for a lot of this illegal activity has really been the enablement of crypto, right? Without crypto, it wouldn't really be as feasible.
Yeah, that's also like saying cyber threats wouldn't exist without portable executable file formats, right? It absolutely enables it, but there's no. I don't think there's any going back at all, right? I don't think ransomware in itself will drive that type of change in sort of de-anonymizing crypto transactions or anything like that.
Well, along this line,
unless everyone's favorite
taxes, right? That's a big part of.
Unless you tie it to terrorism.
You went there. I was hoping you wouldn't go there, but you brought it back again. Not terrorism, Anthony.
Not.
Okay. Well, we'll see what the Senate Intelligence Committee bill
treated like.
Yeah. Along this line of thought here, Dark Angels ransomware gang reportedly netting a $75 million ransom
it's a big one.
payment.
It is.
I think the biggest before
That
was somewhere around
I feel like it's
40
around
million
that.
or something.
Yeah,
I feel like it was
40-something.
unconfirmed. I think the confirmation of some of these big payments has
I think
been
that the victim was
sketchy.
unconfirmed.
the victim was unconfirmed. Yeah,
Right.
it was
But the
supposed to be
payment was
Fortune 50 company, but a $75 million payment was.
And some names were floated around, but we're not going to repeat it.
Who'd you hear?
Who just,
We'll bleep those out.
it's in a Slack channel.
This is not a this isn't cyber TMZ.
Yeah. But so another indication, escalating.
I mean, that's a big number, right? Like,
It's a big number.
that's a big number. Like even for a Fortune 50, that's a big
That's a-
number.
that's a
Like
And they
number.
paid it pretty darn fast
they did.
as far as
yeah, apparently they did. Yeah. So like you got to ask yourself, like, which I did the same thing with Change. I was like, look, if you took that ransomware payment, made an invest, and because that's only the payment. That's not all the other
No.
stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Associated with it.
Right.
If you took that
Right.
payment and you put that into your program,
Oh my goodness, I say that. all
what
the
would that
time.
do for your program?
Yeah.
Like Change is a very
training.
large
It would,
group, but
yes.
would
like,
change it.
It would absolutely change.
Yeah.
It would absolutely change that.
Yeah.
Put it into the company. Put it into the cyber. Put it into your cyber hygiene. Put it into your cyber awareness. Put it into bringing in a team that knows what they're doing. Bring that CISO in that you already probably don't even have. I think that brings someone into this team so we can mitigate this before it even happens.
yeah.
But that goes back to the old, problem that security's always had, which is if you're doing a really good job, then nothing happens, right? It's like,
Right.
I mean, you can count
Yeah.
threats that were
Right.
Yeah, I look
attacks
at
that were thwarted. Or
yeah. The
something
challenge
like
is
that.
like don't let a good crisis go to waste, right? Like that's always what you hear. Is it your budget goes up after either a breach in the industry or God forbid a breach in your own company, right? Like your budget's always going to rise after that. Now, if it's in your own company, maybe you're not going to be the guy getting the new budget, but
Correct.
yeah, unfortunately, that's the way it's played out. And if you're doing, part of that hard justification for the CISO is to go in and say, "Hey, nothing happened to us last year. I need another 10%."
Yeah,
Okay.
That's nothing happened to us last year, right? Yeah,
that's-
but like that, and I think that often the perception is, like the thought is it stays static, right? Like for us, I think part of the challenge is why do I need a ransomware solution? I have an EDR, I have an EPP, and it's like yes, but it doesn't address this piece of it. Like,
Right.
and next year, 3 years from now, there will be something else that we'll need to add as another. We talk about the security onion, the layers. Like, it's not a security beat, right?
Didn't this-
It's
didn't
not
this-
Right.
like
Right.
one
No,
thing.
no, it's layered.
Didn't this most likely this Fortune 50 company that paid $75 million have an EDR and have
Yes,
very mature stack, so-
like every company that's had a successful ransomware attack of note has had something, right? And
multiple
most
things.
of them,
multiple
yeah, that's what I
layers,
say.
a mature program.
And it
Right.
must be it's probably been a really good look, I can't imagine. Okay, I can imagine, but it's most likely that in a Fortune 50 company they had a fairly robust program, right? You're not going to get away at a Fortune 50 nowadays if you've got two guys in a
Right.
closet, right?
Right.
So you've got a decent program. You're doing most of the right stuff to the questions we had earlier, and you still get hit by ransomware. Yeah, I mean that's the problem state. Like you have to be doing something to specifically target this. And right now, like ransomware is kind of the number one threat in general in cyber, and cyber in general is the number one. If not the number one, it's certainly in the top 3 risk to a business.
Sure.
Yes, yeah.
So again, for $75 million, like that goes a long way for control implementation.
It does.
And when you don't put, instead of, okay, now we pay this out. So now guess what? Now you have to put more money into the system, into the
Right.
company to train your staff or
top-
to get in.
on top of that.
So now your budget is
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
it's
completely
out the
blew
window.
Yeah.
It's
2x
gone.
that, 3x
right,
that.
Right.
100%.
Right.
Big ransom payments, big huge ones. What about little ones? Where we've seen more and more instances where, especially with some of the PHI being compromised and stuff, that these threat actors have gone after individuals. Are we gonna like a couple of years be talking about? Oh yeah, I get the breach notices all the time, and I get the I've got 4 RAS groups that I pay $50 each to a month to keep my private health care information private because there's embarrassing things in there I don't want to be released. I mean, is that the direction this could potentially take?
I even say, and going back to what I was talking about, sports technology,
Yeah.
or athletes, because that right there is, just like you're saying, instead of paying a Netflix payment every month, now I'm paying this ransomware. And then, they're athletes, so they're like, oh, hey, these guys, some guy just signed, football. We signed a $150 million deal for this amount of time. Hey, if you have that PHI on that athlete, Who's stopping you?
You could influence them to throw a game.
Yeah,
There you go.
So I was actually gonna go right there with
okay.
where you went. I've actually heard again. I'm traveling a lot, right, Anthony? A lot. Some of the conversations I've had recently have been about this. Have been is the potential for ransomware to extend into kind of VIP and executive side of it, right? Because we've seen this shift where it's not necessarily just the encryption; it's moving to just pure extortion in some cases, right? And so if you take the extrapolation of that and move into look, I can find a ton of information online. We've talked about all this data leakage, right? About someone on the e-staff or a board member about their personal life and their kids. We've seen it with some deep fakes and with phone skimming and being able to, call up somebody with the phone of a person and say, "Hey, I've got your daughter somewhere," right?
Right.
I'm holding her hostage unless you pay. Like moving a lot more to that type of extortion. And when you mentioned the athletes and basketball players, football players.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, I thought you mentioned something about Vegas.
Yeah.
I was like, this could immediately go
That's
to
Hey, we're going to sports
old
betting.
criminal infrastructure, right?
We're gonna sit in that sports
I'm
betting.
gonna mess with the sports book.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sitting right here in
When
Caesars.
I can tell you,
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm getting ready
extorting
to go out.
75
Bigger
million,
Let me tell you, yeah.
extorting 75 million people for $10 each is a lot more than extorting one
That seems
company
pretty
for
complex.
75
Like I'm not
million.
saying that
It
won't
won't.
happen,
Right.
but I think what would be interesting to see if you get more of like down market cyber insurance, where your normal insurance carrier, maybe your house, maybe your rental insurance, or car insurance has some type of an insurance on that particular thing, because I don't think a normal person is going to go and negotiate with a ransomware.
Yeah, most people's
right.
home insurance actually has identity theft protection inside of it now. A lot of people don't know that, but it's fairly common.
But I feel like
for
you'd
that
have to
be
have
there.
some kind of
And
an
that actually goes
additional-
back like years because I
Add
had
on to
some
that.
identity theft, and like I found out after the fact that it's going back 15
But identity
years.
theft
that
versus
included that.
blackmail, slightly different.
Yeah,
nuance
I'm
is
just
what I'm
saying on the
right?
identity
But-
theft side. But I agree with you that, like, look, we've seen it where it kind of evolved from, like, going after grandma and, your aunt and the baker down the street. Like, that's a lot of work, right? Like, that's a lot of juice and a lot of times you have to get that $10 payment. But going after a high net worth individual or going after a company, going after Chase by compromising an executive, I think potentially we could
I
we
think
could
that's
see that
always
type of
existed.
extortion go.
I think that
get more
exists today
complex.
Yeah.
and has existed for years and years and years, right? Like anybody who's a high value target like that is going
There's just
to
a different
be
vector for that.
different
Yeah.
vector.
Right,
I think the
right.
more interesting thing would be going into that, like, could you the MSSP version basically of that, of like, small, very small, less than 10 businesses and individuals as well.
Well, on the small business side, it's really hard, right? We've heard instances of a lot of small businesses who they can't do anything about it. They go under, right? Because they can't recover from the event.
Right. I worked for a nonprofit organization, and their rendition of security awareness, which there wasn't, the IT guy, who's been doing this for 90 years, said to the executive director, just tell everybody, just make sure you turn your computer off at night and you're good. And
That's the availability
I can't
part
tell
of the
you
triangle.
how many dark web monitorings I've done on that company myself. And I said, so yeah, there's a couple of
Yeah.
actors out here trying to, just like they copy the system. They copy, what were you talking about, mimic.
Yeah.
They copy the website. They did the exact same thing. And then, hey, because, their organizations, they're getting in money. They're getting
Crime's
funds.
going to move where the money is. It just is. Yeah.
Yes. And it is small. It's a small organization. It was only 20 people there. But, they were getting a lot of money, get a lot of grants. And,
Yeah, I mean,
you might have to jump big.
nonprofits and NGOs are
Yes.
extremely susceptible to this, right? I mean,
Yes.
like stretched funding. We've seen NGOs being targeted. I mean, for forever at this point in time too. So,
Right.
continue. I think in short, it continues to grow, right? As a threat and as a successful, profitable business, because that's what it is.
Yeah. The model's proven.
Yeah.
So, well, we've had a great conversation,
Yes.
and I can't believe that an hour's gone by so fast already. Before we wrap everything up, Brian, you got some updates? I know a lot of big things have been
absolutely.
happening for Halcyon.
We do have a lot going on here at Halcyon. In particular, a couple of big announcements. One that we made just before BlackCat, and then one that we're kind of about to make, and by the time that this is kind of edited and up, would be made kind of officially public. The first biggest one is going back to the conversation about 80%, 90%, a large portion of these attackers leverage data exfiltration first before they resort to encrypting data on the actual systems and sending you the nice splash screen. We at Halcyon have launched our DXP, Data Exfiltration Prevention module. It's an add-on to the Halcyon anti-ransomware platform, and its focus is on really preventing that data from leaving the network in association with a ransomware campaign itself, right? So we're attempting to deliver this 1-2 punch of the ransomware prevention. The platform also works to recover key material, intercept key material, capture key material, but now with the addition of this module, allows us to add an additional layer of control on data leaving the building in association with these campaigns.
And that's a good indicator of an attack and
absolutely,
attack
yeah.
in progress.
You
So
have
it
an
can inform
attacker
your
that's
EDR, XDR.
100%. Those are all important solutions. All the endpoint controls, EDR, EPP, XDRs are super valuable to have. But if there's an attacker that's maybe just maintained access legitimately, right? Maybe they've bought access, maybe they've converted some kind of an insider threat even. The data leaving the network is an extremely good indicator that something is wrong, right? Somebody's got past the existing security controls, and there's an active campaign in the organization. So, not only are we working to prevent that data from leaving, but additionally give additional early warnings that an attacker is active in your system.
Time to go do a little threat hunting and
100%. Yeah, we're really excited about that. And the second biggest piece is our formal launch on early October of Halcyon for Linux. So a lot has been written about ransomware groups targeting like ESXi hypervisors. Our version is really focused on Linux itself, and Linux in the practical use by the ransomware actors is used as a kind of a staging site, lateralization, moving through it, not necessarily encrypting the data on these Linux systems, but since Linux is such an integral part to most organizations, usually on the kind of the server side, it's definitely a valuable target.
Linux is always on, always available.
Yeah,
right?
It's backbone of the internet, right?
So great place to get a beachhead, great place to move laterally through the network.
100%.
Great place to exfil data because it's usually Linux systems that are handling the big data transfers.
A lot of times, yes. So we're excited that we're extending the capabilities outside of just the Windows systems into Linux now. All of the last couple versions of the major versions of Linux that everybody uses, usually in corporate America. So we're excited about that. That's coming out here in a couple
October,
weeks.
right?
Yeah, first week of October, officially going GA. But yeah, those two things I think are the first really big extensions of the Halcyon platform. So the data exfiltration prevention module, as well as the Linux availability, is huge for us in the fight against ransomware. So
awesome.
All that information is on the site halcyon.ai. We have a number of webinars coming up over the next month or two, focusing on DXP, focusing on how attackers are exfiltrating data, as well as how they're leveraging Linux and how we protect Linux systems too. Nice. So a lot of good stuff here, kind of post BlackCat timeframe.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
And before we wrap, Chaunda, a couple of groups that you work with that are fantastic, and one of the reasons that we met you is because at RSA this year, we give away awesome guitar, beautiful custom made, custom painted, Bond villain designed guitar at all the big events at BlackCat and RSA, and our friends over at Black Girls Hack won at RSA, and then we just did some more things with them. Our man Dave, who does those custom guitars, also made another one for them to raffle off for a charity event for them for some fundraising and stuff, and then that's how you ended up showing up at a party, and we got in a conversation, and got you here and stuff.
I got a scholarship through Black Girls Hack and Diana Initiative, and hey, that's how I ended up. That's how I ended up at Hacker Summer Camp last year, which was awesome.
Quick plug for Black Girls Hack. So what do they do?
So Black Girls Hack is an organization that helps represent underrepresented females to kind of get into the industry, and help them out in cybersecurity and help them out in pen testing and anyone mentoring. And so I'm Women in Cybersecurity. I'm a part of that association. I'm a mentor for new incoming cybersecurity they're trying to test the waters to see if this is what they want to do, and I'm mentoring them with different certifications to help them out. So I'm doing that as well.
And Diane Initiative.
And Diane Initiative is amazing. And I just love their lift while you climb, which is, just giving back. Just giving back. And that's what I do. I'm an advisor, a mentor. And I mean, I just absolutely love it. There's people are like, hey, so what are you doing? How did you do this? And I'm like, no, I'm not, I don't see myself being there, but it's just interesting how just having those conversations and letting them know that, these conversations need to happen. It needs to be in the room. And they're coming from so many different backgrounds. They're coming from education. They're coming from nursing. They're coming from, and just like you said, it really it has to be out there. It just needs to be a part of, even if you're in school or if you do a boot camp, it just needs to be a part of the conversation because it's there.
Totally.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Glad you're doing that work.
And
Really
Thank
important
you.
to mentor.
We'll link all those organizations as well in the video description too.
Okay.
So folks can check them out at their leisure.
Yeah, and you can check us out, as Ryan said, at halcyon.ai. We're on the socials. Come check us out there. Be sure to check out, if you want some more details on some of these attacks and some of these issues that we're talking about, our recent ransomware attacks website. And looking forward to the next show. Thank you again, Chaunda, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.
All right.